Hello, Alan. How are you?
Hi, how you doing? You right?
I'm very good. Great to see you here. Great. Thank you for coming over. I did a little intro of you at the start of the stream, but just for the sake of maybe our new viewers, Alan is the author of the official, what am I talking about? Alan is the author of the official Elite Dangerous novel, Live Revolution, and also have some other books, obviously, as well. But also, he's the lead story designer for Phoenix Point game, which you've just seen on the screen briefly, and which I'm going to be playing after this interview, so we can see for your own eyes what it's all about. And Alan is also the man behind LiveCon, amongst many other people who create LiveCon and who organize LiveCon. This game, Phoenix Point, is made by the studio owned by Julian Gollop, the guy who's made original UFO Enemy Unknown and UFO Terror from the Depths in the 90s. And because I used to write little short stories myself back in the day, long time ago, and I'm quite interested in that sort of topic, I wanted to talk to Alan about how the process of writing a story for a video game differs to the process of writing a story for a book. It must be quite different. So thank you for coming, Alan. But before we jump to that chat, tell us a little bit about maybe yourself. I've made a short intro, but I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Well, I do a lot of stuff. I've always prided myself on being a creative person. So being a person who makes things, does things. And when I was a kid, I was always one of those kids that wanted to sort of to imagine, to dream, to do all sorts of things. And I never let go of that kind of imaginative quality. And I used to, when I was growing up, I used to sort of, I would GM our role-playing sessions. I would be sort of trying to make things all the time. I'd be, sort of getting obsessed with something in particular, writing new rules for a little game, or playing Monopoly and changing the rules around so that it was a more interesting game for me to play on my own. All sorts of different things. I've always been that kind of person, and it sort of filtered through into my professional life. So what I do for a living is I'm a university lecturer, specifically in creative media. It's kind of the area that I specialize in, and my PhD was in, unsurprisingly, given the Elite Dangerous project that was part of it, is in designing fantasy and science fiction worlds. So looking at writing structures and world development techniques that would work across different mediums. And at the point when I started to get involved with Frontier and helping them out, I had a master's in that kind of area, in developing fantasy worlds. So it was very much the work I did on Elite Dangerous, at least at the start, when I was working on the background material and the history source books, and sort of helping Michael Brooks flesh out the mythos of 3300. The work I was doing then was very much a kind of extension of what I'd already done, and it enabled me. It was a stepping stone in my research development that enabled me to move forward in terms of my university career. So incredibly useful as a platform for me, and I'll always be grateful to the people that allowed me to be involved.
Excellent. So a man of many talents, ladies and gentlemen. So I know that you've written a few books, including that official novel for Elite Dangerous. So in the context of I didn't even know that you were helping Mike to develop all this sort of backstory for the 3300s for Elite Dangerous as well. So I can imagine that writing a story for a game must be quite different, which is set in the already existing world. And I'm talking about Elite Dangerous Live Revolution here, which is writing a story for a book which is already set in the already existing universe must be quite different to what it looks like writing a story for the world that you yourself have created. And also, I can't even imagine how different it must be to writing a story for a game which has so many elements that the books don't have. Like, there's a whole player interaction, there's potentially different paths of the story developing, and the story have to react to the player choices, the player have to react to the story that's presented to him. So this whole process, of introducing the story, introducing all the characters, how can you tell us a little bit more about that? How does that work in the context of writing a book and writing a video game story?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there, so let's try and unpack a couple of them. So, all right. So first of all, the difference between writing for games and writing for novels. When you're writing for games, you are attempting to engage someone's participation in the narrative that you're writing. So you are trying to find ways in which you can encourage their engagement in an active sense, rather than them reading the text and imagining the text. And you want them to feel like they can shape the narrative moving forward in terms of what's happening. So every time you manage to do that, every time you manage to touch a player through the writing in such a way as that they make a decision, and that decision creates a narrative that is personal to their particular gaming experience, every time you do that is a win. It is because it creates a more intimate experience by the player being active, by the player choosing to essentially make choices and kind of, taking some kind of active control over the shape of the story. Now, whether that's over the fate of a character, choosing whether this person goes on a mission or doesn't go on a mission, or whether it's deciding to go left or right, or whether it's deciding to rescue the prisoners or not rescue the prisoners, or take the gold or not take the gold, whatever the decision is, as soon as that decision happens, then it's an opportunity for the player to be more invested in the story than they would be if they didn't have the opportunity to make an active participatory choice. So that is essentially the difference. When you start to write, if you start to think about that participation and how you can utilize it, then that becomes the way in which you shape a story going forwards. In terms of the practicalities, quite a lot of games writing is spreadsheet writing. One of the things that we did a little bit of with Phoenix Point is the mission generator has hundreds and hundreds of missions in it, and I wrote some of them. Jonas wrote quite a lot of them, and between us, we're creating a huge randomized mission generator that should allow your narrative to be different to the next player's narrative. But we still wrote all of those missions, to go in there. And I wanted to kind of go a bit further. I wanted to do more procedural design. One of the things that certainly is something I'd like to do more of in the future is more library-based story writing, which is where you create spreadsheets of different options, and you ask the computer to then present one of 6 to a player, and then the next time they do something, they present the next 1 or 6, or so on. So kind of using content libraries in the same way that Frontier uses content libraries to create planets, and other games use content libraries to create different parts of their game. I'm quite a big fan of procedurally generated narrative, and I like to experiment more with it. Yeah, it's called Away Team. It's still in prototype stage. It's one of those half potato projects that you've sort of got to a stage, and then something else comes along that's that seems to be a bit more worthwhile. In that, at the moment, commercially, I'm working on other things, so it's kind of gone in a corner to sit there until I dust it off again. But with Away Team. Away Team was an event-driven narrative system. So if you know and it's quite funny really, in the time that from when I developed that game to now, Betrayal at the House on the Hill, which is a very, very well-known and popular board game, has now spawned a vast array of sequels and spin-offs where people have created different versions of it. So there's a Forgotten Realms version. I think it's Betrayal at Waterdeep or something like that. So essentially, there's different versions of that same game, and that game is designed around the idea of exploring a haunted house, gradually unpacking symbols onto a table, which create a code. As soon as the code is of a certain size, you go to a rule book, you open the rule book up, you go to the page with that code on it, and that becomes the end game scenario for the game. And what I had the bright idea of doing is, why don't we do all the stuff on the table, but then as soon as we have the code goes to a database, and the database generates the scenario. And by using a database to do it, instead of a book that's got 20 scenarios in it, you have a database with 6,000.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned it, because I do remember you were talking about this in the context of that away team game as well, that you would have the database online that people would then refer to on like a device, like a tablet or laptop or phone or whatever.
Yeah, it's still the trial database is still online. If anybody wants to go and sort of test how it works, it's away-team.co.uk. It's still up, and we still run some of the trial processing on it. And yeah, we have two game prototypes that I've trialed a few times for people to have a go at. It basically needs me to do the rest of the writing and put the thing into a nice nice polished printed format with lots of lovely artwork. But I mean that's me. In that, I will have a thing that I'm doing and I'm obsessed with and I'm doing, and then something else will happen. And I am a completer. I do finish stuff, but sometimes something else comes forward and takes your time. And at the moment, the thing that's taken my time is I got a good deal on a novel, so suddenly all hands to the pump back to novel writing. So the board game has to sit on my shelf.
Sure, I don't blame you. I enjoyed that game a lot. That version I played at the time at LaveCon, it was really good. But I'm the same. I have tons of projects started or planned, but never enough time to do them all. So I do know the feeling of starting something, even your intention is to, by all means, finish it. Something else comes up on the way, or there's a block and you cannot proceed any further unless something or someone happens or whatever, and then you jump onto something else, and then this project gets forgotten. No, well, not forgotten, but put aside because you have something else now to do. And I know the feeling. But coming back to Phoenix Point a little bit, when you said that you wanted to do the more procedurally generated stuff, so did some of that end up in the game in the end then, or how did
some did, some didn't? I mean, this was probably, Phoenix Point was my first gig where I was as directly involved in the story shaping of the game as a lead writer. Prior to that, with Elite Dangerous, I worked on background material. That was my stuff. With Phoenix Point, I did all the background material. We put all that together, but I was also writing the active plot of the game. So Randolph Simons III, who, if you're going to play the game later, you will be introduced to, is my character. He's a character I devised, and he is a character who kind of leads some of the story. You're following some of the things that Randolph Simons did to try and save the world. So that process was very different, and by being actively involved in that shaping, we had an awful lot of design meetings. An awful lot of amazing ideas, but you do find that once you start getting towards the release date, some of those ideas end up on the floor, and there is a certain amount of regret in relation to that. Sometimes you do sit there and go, oh, it would be great if we could, but that's the trade-off that happens in games, because the unfortunate problem is that, unlike writing a book where it's just you and then you hand it into an editor, writing a game is a massive collaborative effort. And you've got to, certainly when you're doing design and narrative design specifically, you've got to create things that other people can they can either envisage or that they can realize. If they've got to actually code the things that you're suggesting, then you've got to put them together in such a way that it's possible for them to do that.
Excellent. That's all. That all sounds really interesting. This, because when I can imagine working with so many people that are responsible for different parts of the game must also mean that you have to change your plans every now and then. I don't know how often. Sometimes probably more often, sometimes less often. But to because your work is sort of the very basis of the whole game, the whole narrative of the game. Is what leads the player through, and that's what keeps them engaged into the game. So, were there any sort of times where you had something in mind and you had it planned out and maybe almost even written, and then somebody went to you and said, "Oh, sorry, we cannot do it like this because there is whatever reason, and we have to do it a completely different way," and you were like, "Oh, god damn it, I have to spend like 2 weeks working on this piece."
Yeah, loads of that, which was why it was an eye-opening experience, certainly for me. I think specifically the biggest, I guess regret might be the wrong word. The experience was wonderful. I really enjoyed it, and the Phoenix Point world is a world that I designed, at least in part. So I'd go back there anytime to write more of it. The biggest thing that I envisaged that didn't pan out, and I get why it didn't pan out, was I wanted a procedurally generated character soldier roster, which I talked a little bit at LaveCon about, actually, which was this idea of creating soldier backgrounds through a layered procedural narrative system whereby a spreadsheet would have one sentence that said X was born in, and then second sentence that said in the year, and so on and so on. So you would have this massive database of all these bits, and every time you created a soldier, it would mesh together an individual background for that particular soldier. And so I had this idea, and I thought it was fantastic. And we spoke about it in the design team, and everybody loved it. And then we started to speak about localization and the idea of the game being in as many languages as possible. This was something that the design team and the developers were very keen on. And what we then realized was, because verb structures and male and female verb structures in so many different languages are so different to each other, the narrative system that I was wanting to design would require translating locally in every possible language. So every piece of text would have to be translated into every language that we were doing, and would have to be done, the database would have to be translated line by line in a very, very expensive and time-consuming way. So, that was a problem. So I then thought, well, maybe I can get around this. If all of these lovely backgrounds were written in such a way as the character is telling you who they are, so they talk about their background, maybe we can do it that way. So actually, if they're speaking as their own voice, and it still didn't work. There were still languages that this would not,
like Polish,
not work. It would require too much effort to translate. And so the whole thing kind of, the whole scope of it fell apart. And it was such a shame, because the idea of doing that was the basis of then doing even more beyond it. Because the one thing, I don't know about you, but I've always found with, and I hate to say that I'm now going to dilute or influence your perception of playing a turn-based soldier squad strategy game immediately after having an interview with me. But the one thing that I've always found with that type of game is that you get very attached to your soldiers. And if we can find ways, if we can find ways to get your soldiers to have some sort of input to the narrative, rather than just being the soldiers that you send on the mission, maybe one of them, it's the city they grew up in, or maybe one of them has a bad feeling about a mission, or maybe one of them, remembers one of the enemies that you're going to face, and and therefore is a bit scared, or something else. If we could find ways to add flags that would allow those kind of responses, then you start to involve those individual characters in the plot, and you have this very, very connected immersion, because those soldiers are a resource. They are the thing that they're your vehicle towards being immersed in the game. You care about them, so why not involve them? And there's always been a disconnect in this type of game, and I was trying to build that database to start people thinking about that kind of flag tying to generated characters that could then be built into. But of course, I don't have the programming skill to put that together. So, I'm writing a massive engineering project for somebody who, for some poor coder. So it was a bit of a regret that we weren't able to do that.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, and this is one I remember this specific thing from the presentation. That's why I backed Phoenix Point, because I found out about Phoenix Point at LaveCon. No, I'm sorry, not that specific thing. Just the whole presentation, because I was so taken, but the whole thing, and just meeting Julian in person as well. Oh my God, I mean, UFO Enemy Unknown was the game I played. Oh my God, so much in my youth. And just meeting the person, meeting the guy who's responsible for it was amazing. And the way you guys have presented Phoenix Point at LaveCon then, I remember there were some soldiers were going to go through some trauma, and it could manifest itself in the game. And like you say, I always get attached to my soldiers as well. I mean, I've played Phoenix Point twice now. I've tried to play it, and it defeated me twice now. And I will win it at some point, But I tend to play at the highest difficulty level, just because I like a challenge. And Phoenix Point is one of the not many games that actually made me realize it's game over, but it didn't tell me. Like the first time I played on the legendary level, all of my soldiers died in third mission, and by that time I had no cities or settlements found yet, so I couldn't recruit anybody.
Yeah.
But the game wouldn't end. It was just there, and all I could do just press play and just stare at the mist slowly eating up the world. And I was like, oh my God. That experience, of actually game telling me, nope, you have to. I'm not even gonna tell you you're done. You have to watch it with your own eyes, and and that was so amazing. It was not many games do it. Not many games have guts to actually to kill off your gameplay. And I always play on one save. I don't save scum. If I make a decision in game, that's it. For me, games are about stories. Right, so I create that story. I engineer it by my actions in game. And Phoenix Point is one of those games that tell me your story is over now. But actually, it doesn't tell me. It says the story continues, but you're not part of it anymore because you don't have any soldiers to play anymore. And that's what I found amazing about this game, amongst other things as well.
I mean, there's other elements that again, in terms of design, that we wanted to do more with. Loss narrative is something that I'm a big believer in. I very much believe, I think that there's too much of a prevalence in game design towards achievement and success. So players are engendered towards achievement and success. So if they fail a mission, then they do as you say. They save before the mission. They go through. They fail the mission. They restore their save, and they then they go back and they try and do it again, because they're engendered towards this idea that that you have to succeed to develop and progress the narrative. I love lost narratives. I think lost narratives are an undervalued resource, and if you have exclusive lost narratives that only kick in when you lose, that you will never get if you don't lose, that kind of is a little way of cutting against that culture of having to the perfect 10. You know what I mean? The having to kind of, because
definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a kind of competitive nature of that towards the way in which people, and this isn't a criticism, but I'll use the word anyway. The way in which people parade their achievement on the internet. We have these vast amount of resources now where we can say, look, I reached the final level, or look, I saw the stuff. And that's all privilege. In that, if you got there, fantastic. You have some small amount of privileged information that you got somewhere that other people didn't get to. The minute you start to proclamate it outside of the game environment, what you're essentially doing is you're spending that privilege, and and people might well go, oh wow, you're amazing, and give you a kind of a bit of temporary status in terms of making you feel like you're the one that got there first. But it's very temporary and it's very fleeting. And from a game designer's point of view, you don't really want people to be kind of showing the game content, the exclusive elements of the game content. You don't really want them to be sharing it and showing it outside of the game environment. You want them in the game environment to try and find it. And as soon as it starts to proclamate outside, what then starts to happen is it gradually devalues. I remember the first time the Thargoid showed up, that video went everywhere like wildfire, and you're sitting there thinking,
yes,
I've seen the video now. What does that mean when I experience it? It's not quite as fresh. It won't give me the same. I'm sure the person who saw it first, that experience must have been absolutely jaw-dropping. Sure, he recorded a video and everything else. That's fine, but to have that visceral experience in complete surprise, not knowing that was there, that was coming. It's very difficult to have those kind of experiences in games anymore, because we have quite such a connected society. Now, that's not me criticizing our connected society. I love the internet, but you can see why this intrinsic idea of value is tied up in design, and you have to find ways to think of how you can retain value when you're making something, when you're making a narrative. I review books. When I review books, you're continually thinking, I can't put spoilers in. I want people to actually go and read it. I don't want to tell them all the plot. So there are different ways it works out in different mediums. But I do think this idea of retaining value in anything that you make is really important.
Definitely, I agree. So just moving, because we're running slightly over now, which is not a bad thing. Actually, it's lovely chatting to you, and I'd rather chat to you than play, to be fair. But moving forward, would you have any? Oh, actually, I wanted to ask about something as well with Phoenix Point. I know there's still a couple of DLCs to come out. Are you involved in those as well?
No.
No. Okay, fair enough. Okay, no more questions then.
There is one internal writer at Snapshot, and there were two of us as lead writers. Essentially, we were writing all the plot and all the content. The DLC, I think Blood and Chrome, was finalised in sort of December, January, and I had no input on Blood and Chrome. And I have said, I've said to Julian and to the team, if you need me, you know where I am. But I think they've got it in hand. So in terms of developing the story going forwards, then I think it's going to be down to Bave and the rest of the team. And fair play to them. They pulled off a great game, and hopefully Snapshot will continue, and they'll produce some other great stuff.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. So would you have any sort of general tips or advice for people who maybe are looking into getting into writing or becoming a writer for a video game? What those people need to pay attention to? Any traps one can easily fall into?
Well, it's a very kind of fluid business. One tip for any writing content, and I would say this, and I'm not just thinking computer games here in terms of any element of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. One tip is to prowl around Kickstarter and prowl around Fig. I heartily advise that to anyone who is looking to get involved in writing for franchises. Prowl around those places, because often people who are running projects don't know what they need, and they don't know what a writer can do for them. One of the things that happened with Snapshot was when I went over to Sophia and we were working on Chaos Reborn. Julian was showing me the level cuts, which basically, these are splash screens that are loading the level, and he's showing me this splash screen, and he's showing me the text that's on the bottom, and I just said, can you give me that text? And of course, in 50 words, he's put down something that describes the environment that they're going into. And so I took his text and rewrote it into 35 words that did the same, but actually also gave a sense of this place having a history, that there's some kind of mystery behind who used to live in this place, etc., etc. Because that's what a writer does. And in games writing, wordage is real estate. In a book, in other mediums, you're allowed lots of room for your description. People want you to be economic and they want you to keep the pace going. But in games, words are real estate. So everybody wants you to do stuff in less words. So the quicker you can do things, if you can do it in 20 words as opposed to 25, that's less print on the screen.
Sure.
And you've also got to be prepared for the fact that splash screen that I talked about, most people who are playing that game are going to click through that as fast as they can. They don't care about the little tiny bit of mysterious history about the foothills, but you're not after most people. You're after touching one person.
Like me, because I love lore in games. I always read everything in games.
Exactly. if you make that connection with one person, then you succeed. And then if maybe you walk on and then there's a mission, and then you write the summary of the mission at the end, and you leave something about a particular character. And if one person really gets attached to that, and that's their favorite bit, you succeed. That's what you have to think about you're doing in games. Quite a lot of the time, your writing is going to be either read through or flicked through so that people can get to the thing that they want to get to. But
sure,
you have to be aware that it isn't about most people. It's always about one or two people.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So the last question then. I know that you are currently promoting your new book. Can you tell us a little more about it, please?
So I strangely, being a rubbish scientist, in that when we were doing Elite Dangerous and I was writing Late Revolution, Elite Dangerous is very much, obviously it's very much hard science fiction, or it's trying to be hard science fiction with a few kind of hand waviums and a few kind of contrivances. Strangely, after that process, I went off and wrote an even harder science fiction book, in that I wrote Fearless in I think I finished it about 2016, 2017, and got a publishing deal with Flametree Press in 2019, and it's currently being promoted, and it's out next month. The pre-reviews have come in, and actually it's pretty humbling. It's quite a strange situation, because this is the first book I've ever had where I get a dust jacket, as in it's got a nice hardback with that lovely, that sort of floppy paper cover. So it's the first book I've had that's got one of those, which is amazing. And Flametree are quite a big imprint in America. They're one of the main publishers of Ramsey Campbell, who is one of the greatest horror writers that the world's ever known. And so to be in a publishing house with him is pretty special. I have lovely quotes from people that have read it. They've really enjoyed it. It's kind of, to sum it up, it's the Wrath of Khan meets the Expanse.
Wow.
So those are my two big touchstones. And one of the key themes in it is the portrayal of disabled characters in space. I have a bit of a thing, I suppose, about creating empowering characters, or characters who people can identify with, that are from all different diverse sections of society, and also specifically with disabled characters, not having characters who are overcoming their disability to try and achieve something, because I think it's a bit of a tired trope. I'm very keen on characters who live lives authentically, and they feel that when a reader sort of identifies with them, they can feel the authenticity of that person's sort of truth and the way in which they are. So yeah, this is this kind of packs all of those themes into 360 odd pages, and it's been an amazing ride. The last few weeks have been incredibly humbling, because I've had some wonderful comments. We've got I think there's a review in Amazing Stories magazine, which is one of the oldest science fiction magazines in the world. It was founded in 1926. Wow. They're reviewing it in their read to look out for in September, and it's going to be it's one of their recommended for September, which is lovely. So I found that out last week. We had a lovely review in Publishers Weekly. We've had a couple of other reviews online. So yeah, the publicity machine is starting to crank up. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what people think when they read it.
Excellent. That's good to hear. I'm definitely gonna buy it because I'm looking for a new book to read. Currently, I'm reading Dune at the moment. I've never read Dune before, so I'm nearing the end of that now. So I'm definitely gonna buy it. I'm gonna be looking out for it. I think that's it, Alan. I think we've run almost half an hour over the time. So thanks for being here with me. I'm gonna play some Phoenix Point now.
Okay, always happy to chat with you. And any time that you want to talk more games design, or if you get any questions from your listeners or anything else about elements to do with this kind of stuff, I'm always happy to answer.
Excellent, that's great. It was very interesting, to talk to you. So yeah, thank you very much for coming.
No worries. You take care.
You too. Bye.